I ended up getting a paralytic illness in my second year of business school called Guillain-Barré syndrome.
Holy
Guillain-Barré,
smokes.
it strips the sheaths around your nerves so they can't take signals from your brain. So I was fully paralyzed, and it's one of those things. I'm sure you've had sort of those,
Wow.
if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans type moments. I had all these plans. I was going to come back to California and start companies, and that's what I was going to do.
Yeah.
And I just got sidewinded by this paralytic illness, and I couldn't walk, and I was in intensive care and then a rehab facility. And at the time that all my classmates in business school were interviewing, I couldn't walk. I am in the hospital. I've not yet recovered mobile function. My parents are there, and I am shitting in front of my parents, like quite regularly, right? At that time, I would have been a 29-year-old man, and my little sister's there, who's I'm close with, and my friends are coming in to visit, and I'm just like this giant baby, and my parents are watching me, defecate. I need help with everything. I need to be fed. The thing I'll tell you that's, it's a goofy thing to say. I'm happy it happened. I'm happy it happened, and it's because it made me a little more thoughtful. I think I was kind of careening towards, startups or bust, and I still ended up there, but it was kind of maybe with more motives around ego and money and things like that. And it really just stopped me in my tracks, literally. And I had nothing to do but think about, well, gosh, as much as I don't like to admit it, I'm going to die, and I have limited time here, and like how I want to use it. And so it feels like I probably course corrected into something that, to me at least, is more interesting. I'm excited to get up and work on this problem. I'll ask you. I'll kind of return it to you. Have you ever had something that, from the outside, it might look like a tragedy, but it also allowed you to rethink some things?
Yeah, it's interesting the way your viewpoint changes. Nothing compared to that, but I herniated like 2 discs in my back in college as well. Had to be in bed, and I actually made the mistake. I thought that you were supposed to lay down like when you like had spasms, and like you're basically not supposed to, and so it just completely messed me up. And so anyways, I herniated the space between L4 and L5, and couldn't walk for a couple of days. Like had to the only thing that finally worked was when I laid down for a week straight essentially, and like on these medications, and had to kind of teach myself how to walk really fast. But nothing compared to what you had. But no, I mean, it's interesting, right? Because it's I think as a founder, as an entrepreneur, and when you have those sort of things happen to you, and then or things that happened to you as a kid, actually one of the things I really like to do whenever I'm meeting founders is tell me about a time that you've experienced adversity, right? And how did you get out of that?
Yeah.
And that's some obvious adversity, right? So for you, anything that could happen to your startup is not going to be anything close to that.
I love
right?
that point. Yeah, and you said something I actually want to push back on, where you said, "Oh, it's nothing compared to this. It's nothing compared to that." Like, pain is relative, right?
No, it's very true.
You're going to feel it the way you feel it. And there are people that have gone through things that are objectively way worse than what I dealt with. But I love that point that you made. You almost, it's not sexy, right?
Yeah.
But it's I'm still here. Like, I don't know if that what just does not kill you always makes you stronger, but it allows you to realize you can survive a lot.
I remember growing up as a kid, times were tough, and my family, they immigrated to the US from Venezuela. And actually, I feel very fortunate. So I'm the only person in my entire family born in the United States. Everybody else before or after me was born in Venezuela. I don't know if you know what's going on in Venezuela right now, but it's terrible. And so my life would just be frankly totally different. So I've always been very thankful just for winning the lottery and being born in the United States. I know some people might disagree or whatever, but for me, I already think I already won the lottery there. At the bare minimum here, we might disagree with our political leaders, or we might disagree, but we even have the ability to disagree, right? We're not going to be we're not going to disappear. We're not going to lose our jobs, for those sort of things. There's definitely been times with running my company and running my business where I've been very, very stressed out, or trying to get a deal, or it's not going to work out, or this or that. And I have this, I don't want to, I'm going to freak people out. You get this chest pain, or this anxiety pain. And I'm like, shit, I remember having that when I was a kid. And I know this sounds really weird. I remember cause things were, when I was a kid, things were sometimes stressful with family stuff and whatever. And what's funny is that I don't know if it's because of that as a kid. Now, when I have that feeling, um, it doesn't make me nervous. It doesn't make me scared. Like I can tolerate risk in a way that most people cannot. And I look at it
Yes.
as my superpower. Like my superpower is that I'm able to tolerate risk at a level that most people can't. And I'm willing to push the boundaries to a level which most people can't, because there's things that I've already experienced in my life that to me, like maybe comparatively to someone else that we were talking about, might not seem like a big deal, but to me were impactful enough that I was like, it's not going to be any worse than this, most likely.
Oh my
So,
gosh, I can
so like,
connect with that. Yes.
I've said this before with a couple folks, like, I have aspirations one day. I think it'd be really interesting to create, some level of a fund. The question I would ask every single founder that would ever come into this fund, is, tell me, like what I said a moment ago, tell me about a time in your life where you experienced adversity and how did you come out of it? And it doesn't have to be professional. It can be personal. It can be anything, right? I know this guy who, he's a really talented engineer, and I'm going to tell him to listen to this. I'm not going to name him by name, but he spent 13 years in a refugee camp in Africa.
Holy shit.
So 13 years in a refugee camp in Africa, and he's over here now, and he's really good engineer. He taught himself a lot of stuff, did classes or whatever, and he's just very smart. And like, there's nothing that he likely will experience, hopefully, that will be more difficult than that, right? And so for him, it's like, man, like, I'm just going to work my ass off. I'm just going to keep going. I'm going to work hard. I'm going to hustle. Like, I have this
Yeah.
ability, And so I love stories like that. And I think it's two different ways to look at the world, right? You could look at it like, oh yeah, I grew up in this, in this refugee camp, and because of that, I don't have the ability to do these things, or that's my superpower. Another quick example, and then I'll give you back the floor. Paul, I'm supposed to be
Oh
interviewing
no,
you.
no, I love it. No, look, we're connecting as human beings. That's what matters most to me.
I know this gentleman also who I can't remember what it's called, but he got bit by an arachnoid, so spider, and it caused him to lose his voice. And as a result of it, when he speaks, sometimes people assume that he's deaf, and he's not deaf. And but this person is very, very passionate about the forestry industry, and he's working on a product that is going to basically help with carbon credits and carbon neutral type stuff, and like, he's just all about it. And so he was kind of explaining it happened to him, and I was like, man, like, I know like you might feel self-conscious about that, but if I can help you with anything, it's, because he wanted some help, kind of thinking through his company and branding and so forth. I was like, honestly, I think the best help I could give you is like, that's your superpower. Like the fact that you speak that way is actually your superpower. And it's not necessarily like that your speech is a superpower. It's that you experience a level of adversity that most people would just recline from, and then just like want to take a step back, and you're actively building a company, and you're pitching investors, and it's in the same type of space in general, right? Like where you're like thinking about the environment. Like you're not going to let some spider that bit you, that took your voice away, like get in your way of like solving what your why is, what you're trying to do. And I just love that. I love people that can do that. And I think it's really just a frame of reference of how we think is, you can look at the same thing, and it's like how you really look on that and reflect on that to depend on to really create your world from there. Yeah.
For me, if we're going to continue the superhero analogy, like Spider-Man got bitten by a spider, right? Batman's parents got killed, and then he grew up in a hole. Like, you don't get the superpowers without going through the trauma. And the funny thing for me, it's a strange way to put it, but it quiets the mind. I go to some therapy now. It's important to maintain my marriage, etc. And my therapist said something interesting. She said, when you were paralyzed, my read is that your flight response was killed. And so you have a fight response, but you don't really run away. And I think that it quiets the mind, and there's a little bit less fear. You certainly care a lot less about what other people are going to think. But I guess, you tapped into something for me too, which is that I love the idea of figuring out the things that have hit you hard in life, whatever that means to you, and then how can you use that as motivation. And I meant what I said. I feel lucky that I had that forced shift in perspective. Luckier still, but I survived it without lasting paralysis. But it's good.